Hey guys, it's Camus, and we're going to take another look at sacrificing things on d5 in the Mora Gambit. Today we're going to follow the epic game Esserman-Van Wely. Look, Van Wely is a strong grandmaster, very strong, and he succumbed to the Mora Gambit in 2011 in Orlando. So let's get right to it. 1e4, c5, d4, c takes d4, c3, d takes c3, gambit accepted, knight takes c3, knight to c6, knight f3, e6, bishop to c4, a6, castles, and now knight g to e7. In Esserman's book, he calls this the professional's choice, and apparently it's favored by a lot of strong players when they face the Mora. Bishop to g5 is a logical follow-up. f6, and now best here seems to be bishop to e3. Knight to g6. Now white can play knight to d4 here as a normal move and has done okay with it, but Esserman prefers the move in the game, which is bishop to b3, as he doesn't want to exchange a lot of pieces early on. So bishop to b3, and now apparently Van Wely had a bit of a think here. He was probably recalling that somebody had played bishop e7 recently, which is a desirable move to try and get castled. But after knight to a4 and something like b5 leads to disaster. After bishop to b6, the queen is checkmated here. And instead of b5, after knight a4, if he plays castles, then knight b6, rook to b8. White has a real bind. He has two ways to win here. He can play the queen to d3 with the bind, or he can play sharply with knight d5, e takes d5, e takes d5, king to h8, getting out of the way of the discovered check, d6 anyway, rook to e8, d takes e7, rook takes e7, bishop to c5. And in both cases, black has more than adequate compensation for the pawn. Van Wely did not play this, so instead of bishop to e7 that we just looked at, after bishop to b3, he played b5. A move often seen in this type of structure. And now knight to d5. He could have tried declining the sacrifice here with rook to b8, rook to c1, a5, trying to trap the bishop, a3, and if he plays a4, bishop to a2, e takes d5, e takes d5, and we're doing well here. Or instead, after a3, a4 that we just looked at, he plays e takes d5, e takes d5, and white simply has a big advantage here. Computer gives it as practically winning. As it turned out in the game, he didn't even hesitate, according to Esserman, and he just snatched the knight right off. E takes d5. Obviously, e takes d5, knight c to e5, and as we've learned from previous videos, the pawn that recaptures on d5 is destined to go to d6, and this is what he does here. Now, the computer gives this position as equal, but as you will see, it continues to revise its evaluation upwards as the game progresses. Bishop to b7, knight takes e5, and now he can play knight takes e5, but it's not so great for him. After rook to e1, queen to b8, with the idea of trying to eliminate this horribly disruptive pawn on d6. Bishop to c5 maintains the pawn, and we're planning f4, winning a piece back with an overwhelming position. After knight takes e5, that wasn't knight takes e5. You can try instead f takes e5, which is what he played in the game. And now f4. Again, this is logical. The king's stranded in the center. We're ahead in development. So it makes sense to try and open the position. And this is the critical position of the game. Now the computer has revised its evaluation up to plus over equals. So a number of moves are possible here. Queen F6 is given in the game, but it loses. So let's look at the alternatives. First of all, you can play knight takes F4. And now white has two ways to win. Let's look at both of them. Rook takes F4 is one way. E takes F4. Queen to H5 check. G6. Queen to E5 check. Bishop to E7. Queen takes H8 check. Bishop to F8. Rook to E1. F takes E3. Rook to E3 check. Queen to E7 only move. Rook takes E7. King to D8. And queen takes F8 checkmate. Alternatively, you can try queen to H5. And now black has two moves here. You can play G6. Queen takes E5. And we get a similar fiasco as we just saw after queen takes H8, etc. So instead, let's move back. He plays knight takes H5. And bishop to F7 is checkmate. Okay, so after F4, we just looked at knight takes F4. So what about E4? Trying to keep the position closed? Well, it's not so good. F5, knight to E5, queen to H5 check, G6, F takes G6, knight takes G6, and bishop to F7 is checkmate. So let's go back. After F4, his third possibility is queen to H4. Queen to H4, F takes E5, and again we're threatening bishop to F7. So black has a couple of possibilities here. He can play queen to E4, bishop to F7 anyway, king to D8, queen to D2, king to C8, rook A to C1, king to B8, rook F to E1. We're threatening to win the queen here with bishop to A7 check. So queen to G4, bishop to D5. He could play knight takes E5 here. Bishop takes B7, king takes B7, rook to C7 check, king to B8, queen to D5, knight C6, bishop to A7 check, rook takes A7, rook to E8 check, knight to D8, rook to D8 is checkmate. Instead of that, after bishop to D5, you can just play bishop to D5, queen takes D5, we're threatening rook to C8 check, king takes C8, queen takes A8. That threat is unstoppable. Okay, so after F4, we just looked at queen to H4. So E takes F4 is another possibility here. And this may well be black's best shot. There's a lot of analysis on this line in the book, which of course I urge you to get. Rook to E1, F takes E3, rook takes E3 check, bishop to E7, queen to D4 check. And although white has sacrificed two pieces, the computer gives at least half a pawn advantage to black here. You could see that black's in pretty sorry condition. Obviously he's going to get this piece back on E7. White is also threatening to take the pawn on G7 with unfortunate consequences for black. All of these lines seem to be pretty good. And if this is the best that black can do, then we can feel pretty confident about this knight to D5 sacrifice. Okay, so going back, after queen H4, F takes E5, we just looked at queen E4. Let's look at knight takes E5. rook to f4, exclam, and now black can try queen to h6, but then rook takes f8 is winning for white. After rook to f4, instead of queen to h6, we can play queen to d8, queen to h5 check, g6, queen takes e5, queen to e7, rook takes f8, rook takes f8, and queen e7 checkmate. That was a pretty exhaustive analysis of what happens after f4. In the game, he didn't play any of these possibilities. Instead, he played queen to f6, which the computer, all of a sudden, last move, was giving plus over equals. Now it's just simply winning for white. F takes e5. Queen takes e5. And now white has 2 wins. He can play, as played in the game, he can play bishop to g5. Or he can play bishop to f7, king to d8, bishop to b6 check, king to c8, or rook to e1, and we're going to crash in on e8, or black will lose his queen. In the game, after queen takes e5, he didn't play this line. He played bishop to g5, which prevents castling queenside and also threatens bishop to f7 checkmate. Bishop to e7 is the only move. After bishop to g5, he could have tried queen takes g5, queen to e1, bishop to e7, bishop to f7 check, king to f8. Let's say you could try king to d8, queen to a5 check, king to c8, queen to c7 is checkmate. Instead of king to d8, he could have tried king to f8 after bishop to f7 check, king to f8, bishop takes g6, discovered check, king to g8. Well, you can try bishop to f6, queen e7 check, the bishop is pinned of course, king to g8, and bishop to f7 is checkmate. So instead of that, after bishop takes g6, discovered check, goes to king to g8 instead, bishop to f7 check, king to f8, d takes e7, queen takes e7, bishop to h5, wins the queen. None of that happened. After bishop to g5, he played, oh, I should say there is one other possibility. You could play queen to c5, rook to f2, and we're winning here as the bishop is still immune. Okay, so in the game, after bishop to g5, he played bishop to e7, which, as I mentioned before, is the only move. And now it's just a mop-up operation here. Bishop to f7 check, king to d8, d takes e7 check, knight takes e7. Now strong move from white, queen to d2. Black is still up a pawn, but he's utterly lost here. King to c8, trying to get out of dodge, rook a to c1, knight to c6, rook f to d1, threatening bad things on d7, queen to f5, trying to defend against that, bishop to f4, exclam according to Esserman, queen takes f7, queen to d6, I can see something bad is going to happen on c7 there, king to d8, rook takes c6, bishop takes c6, queen takes c6, and Van Wely resigned, probably due to something like either rook to c8, bishop to g5 check, king to e8, queen takes c8 mate, or rook to a7, bishop to g5 check, king to e8, queen to c8 checkmate. Another great game from Mark Esserman. Some new analysis here, and This is one of black's strongest continuations. I hope you found this instructive in some way. I know I did. All right. Well, we'll be doing more of these as time goes on. I'll see you when I get back. Thank you.